7:30. The North St. Paul Planning Commission meeting of, what is today? April 6th. So, since I didn't open my agenda, I'm sitting here thinking, what's on the agenda in what order?
Roll call is next.
Yeah, roll call. Let's do roll call.
Chairman Blees,
Here.
Commissioner Weiss,
Present.
Commissioner Brenna,
Present.
Commissioner Muick,
Here.
Commissioner Rathi.
Here.
Is that how you say your name, Rathi? Rathi. And City Council Liaison Norby.
Here.
And I am here, Community Development Director. And next up is adopt the agenda.
Excellent. Are there any comments, any discussion on the agenda for tonight? If not, I will entertain a motion to adopt it.
I'll move to adopt the agenda.
Moved by Commissioner Weiss,
I'll say, yeah, go ahead.
second by Commissioner Rathi. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None. So we have an agenda. Next is approval of meeting minutes from the last meeting.
March 2nd.
March 2nd. I have one question. It was our meeting where we did training. On the reports from staff, Brandy, you stated, according to this, scheduled for the next month's planning commission meeting. I'm not sure what that was about. Because it says, the city council approved the site plan for Polar Plaza, and it's scheduled for a planning commission meeting.
Yeah, that is incorrect. I think it probably should have just ended at City Council approved the site plan.
Yeah, that was the end of it, right? Okay. Are there any other discussion items regarding meeting minutes? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve meeting minutes for the March 2nd Planning Commission meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve the meeting minutes.
Commissioner Brenna,
I'll second.
second by Commissioner Muick. All in favor?
Aye.
Approved. Meeting minutes.
Next item is meeting open to the public, and we don't have anybody on Zoom or in the audience.
Very well.
And then public hearing is after that, and there is no public hearing item.
There is no public hearing.
And the next item after that is discussion of zoning map amendments. Would you like me to start with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So this was on the agenda based on the fact that we don't have any applications to talk about tonight. So I've dug into what we had established in the beginning of the year is the work plan for the Planning Commission. And this is the first item. So I took a look at the records to find all of the past ordinances where the city has amended the zoning map, and I, came up with a spreadsheet for that. And I also found that the zoning ordinance itself was amended, or updated rather, in 2015. And so the zoning map was amended shortly after that 2015 ordinance update. But then in 2019, the city council approved the 2040 comprehensive plan. And the future land use map did have some inconsistencies compared to the zoning map, and the map was never actually amended after that. There wasn't a ton of recommended changes though, because the zoning ordinance happened so much. It was shortly, the comp plan was shortly after the zoning ordinance was written, so there wasn't a lot of variation in what the future was to hold. But there was a couple of key areas, and I think it'd be best if I probably put it up on the screen.
The key areas you've identified with the dark blue purplish shading, correct? Those are the areas of discussion?
No.
No. That was on the 2040 plan.
I think that's,
Yeah, those areas, I just copied over into the packet the future land use map as it was presented in the plan.
I see.
And those areas, wish there was a way for this to show.
Yeah, because there are I guess there are varying areas there, the 2020, 2030, and 2040 is what
Hold
those
on here.
represent.
This is a really clumsy way to do this. That's acting as my other screen instead of this one. But, okay, so the shaded areas or the hatched areas, those are identified as redevelopment locations in the future, and they're phased. So just ignore those for the purposes of our discussion tonight. The colors underneath of them, the solid colors, are the future land use categories. And the ones in question are the one that, well, this one actually is shaded. So it's this panhandle piece of property that,
17th.
yeah, that is shaded for, I believe, medium density residential. Yep. And it is zoned presently, well, it is showing up as zoned R2, but there was never an ordinance that actually made it so. So if we're going to actually rezone it, we should make it so officially. So that one's kind of hanging out there as a question.
So it shows R2 on the 20, on what plan, what map?
On the zoning map.
On the current zoning map? But there's no official record of it having been changed to R2?
Correct. So this is the,
What's the plan, what's the planned use of that piece of property?
the planned land use. The planned land use is medium density. Actually, I do have as one of the materials here.
Was it rezoned? I mean, you don't have any record anywhere in that it was officially rezoned?
Correct. Okay. So it's showing, okay, so there's two systems. So this is our internal mapping system. It shows it as being already rezoned. I think that was maybe just an oops, a GIS update that shouldn't have happened. But if you look on the actual official zoning map on our website, it is R1. So it's more of a mapping or an internal GIS glitch, if you will. So this still does need to be officially rezoned if we wanted to do so. So it's kind of hard to see these side by side. Let's see if I can make it happen though. Oh, let's see. I don't want that. I want this.
So is it just a matter of going through, for us to go through that zoning process to meet to rezone it, to officially go through that process to rezone it?
Well, that's part of the discussion. So what we have here is reading through the comp plan, there wasn't like specific, you shall rezone X property based on the future land use map. There wasn't any specific recommendation that said that you need to do a full-blown rezoning to match the future land use map. But they did call out a couple spots. So that was one of them, this first panhandle piece. And then the other one is south of 7th, and it didn't really get into any more description than south of 7th. So if you look at the area that is south of 7th,
Is that south of 7th, west of 1st?
is that what my memo said?
I'm just looking at the blue squares on that triangle section.
South of 7th Avenue, just is all that the that the comprehensive plan said. So just browsing it, comparing the two maps. And so if you can see them on the screen here, the zoning maps on the left. Where did my cursor go? This is really difficult. There we go. Okay, so the zoning here is the red. The bright red is the downtown mixed-use MU1. And then you'll see the majority of the residential property south of 7th is single-family. except for these orange areas are medium density, and the yellow are high density. So there's some more yellow, bright yellow. And then if you compare it to our future land use map, so the bright yellow. So this area seems to match. So this is medium density.
Yeah, the colors are not consistent from one.
Yeah,
map to
it
the
is
other,
hard to read.
unfortunately.
So I think we're okay on the southwest side.
Yeah,
The blue here is, slated as potential likely to redevelop. And that is,
and
look over
that's,
here, where is that?
you have to slide it a little bit
Oops.
to your left.
Oh,
It's the area
that's
that's
this.
orange.
okay, so we've got that.
Yep. I think there's a zone west of Helen.
West of Helen, here.
Yeah,
So we've got,
that's different between the two.
where is Helen? Oh, so this stuff. Oops, my cursor.
No, it's down, if I could just, yeah, right there.
Right here, okay. So this is single family and it,
And I think there are several
Thirty.
other areas as you go further east on 7th.
yes.
There will be
Further
quite a few
east and
other
north.
ones that are
So
that are
that,
shown as a higher density on the right map than as compared to the left map.
correct. So that is basically the question for us tonight, is this, do we want to, well, we could do a couple of approaches. We could just go ahead and proactively rezone it and just match the comp plan. We could wait until any of those property owners come in, and in which case we would, review the comp plan and recommend rezoning based on that comp plan, and just kind of leave it as is until change comes to us. Or we could, I guess those are just the two paths. Third option.
There are no, I'm speaking as a question, but my understanding is there's no negative impact to the single-family residents, property owners.
No, there's no
if
negative.
If we rezone.
Correct. It's a
Because they're-
status quo situation.
They're still complying with the zoning ordinance and all the rest. I mean, they aren't going to become a non-conforming use or anything like that. So the only impact on them might be that it might actually increase the value of their property.
It could. It depends on your perspective, I suppose.
Yeah.
If you're that property owner that
Yeah.
is going to have a neighbor that's going to subdivide or, put an
Or, yeah,
apartment next to them, then they may have a strong opinion about it.
consolidate properties adjacent or something like that and start
Yeah.
developing something that's a multi-family or something.
Correct, yep. So it is one of those things where it could potentially raise your value, provide options for you. It could bring them closer into conformity with the zoning districts, because I would imagine, without having done the analysis, that these single-family lots are pretty small compared to probably what the R2 would be. Those old platted lots are probably 40 or 50 feet wide, and I think the modern lots are 60 or 70.
Yeah.
So that would be one benefit, bringing them closer into conformity.
If we were to rezone, we'd have to do that via public hearing, correct?
Correct. We would do a notification directly to those property owners being impacted. We would do 300 feet beyond those properties, and then there would be a public hearing, and then planning commission review and council approval. And it's done by ordinance.
Has it been discussed among council members at all?
Not to my knowledge.
Not to my knowledge either.
Can I ask you where did, I see these blue bolded areas as areas that are, I think, likely to be redeveloped. What information do we have that led us to believe that those are going to be likely to be redeveloped?
I don't know if I have the information to answer that right now.
Just a curiosity, because it seems kind of hodgepodgey. It's these little smatterings here and there. I mean, I can kind of get the 7th Avenue corridor, but I just wonder where this property up on 17th, where that came from.
I believe the city owns some of that land.
This,
That's what prompted that discussion.
The city owns the L-shaped piece.
yep, so that makes sense for that. The ones that are in the downtown, I bet there was some kind of analysis at the time of the comp plan in terms of which property might be considered underutilized, or this comp plan was done in, what did I say, what year?
2015?
Oh, 2018.
2018?
So that would have been around the time that Anchor Block and all of that new development was occurring, so it was probably assumed that this is gonna spur some additional development, which it has, but not necessarily in the spots that we foresaw. So it's not a bad idea that we had that, initial thought about where do we think that redevelopment might occur. But what the planners at the time had in mind when they came up with that, I'm not entirely sure without, digging back into that comp plan.
That takes you, and the blue, the wide blue outline, the bold blue outline is a 2040 plan. So that's redevelopment at some point in the future.
Sure.
But the 2020 plan, that 2020 component has been redeveloped. Basically, it's pretty much done.
Yeah, well, they knew what was going on at that point.
They knew what was happening
Yeah.
there. It's that crystal ball was very clear at that moment.
Same with the 2030, isn't that where, no, that's not.
2030 is
That's Burwald, and then that's,
Shifsky and other industrial uses behind it, is it not?
I think Burwald owns this stuff in
The
yellow.
yellow outline?
And then Shifsky's is not on there at all.
Well, Shifsky's has the yellow outline around it. No, I'm sorry. Shifsky's is the other side of Gateway. My mistake.
Yeah, the two sites that we are thinking about possibly redeveloping are not on here at all as sites, which is interesting.
My opinion is we should make the zoning match, or make this map accurate, because anybody that's gonna be looking at our zoning map currently right now potentially is gonna be looking at one that's a little bit out of date or incorrect to what the comp plan is pushing for, right? So I would say we should just fix the map and make it look like the comp plan so that we're all aligned, and that way there's no surprises when somebody only looks at the zoning map and then they realize, oh, actually, oops, this is actually an R, or potentially is going to be an R2 or whatever. So that seems to just save a step of somebody making a mistake.
I would concur with that. Seems a logical approach.
So if that needs to go, if there does need to be a hearing to go through that process, and, obviously one of the questions is gonna be is what is gonna be the impact, what impacts are they gonna have? Is that gonna impact a potential buyer coming in that would be developing that? Is that gonna impact the sellers that they're gonna get more for it? Does that potentially impact how those properties are gonna be assessed by the county, impacting their property taxes because they know how that property would be used in the future? That's gonna increase the value to a potential developer. I guess I'm asking those
Yeah.
as potential questions, because if I'm a property owner on one of those pieces, those are the natural things that go through my mind.
That was a lot. Can you,
Yeah.
let me see if I can take them one by one.
Well, in particular, the property tax question is probably, there's not a negative if it increases the value of the property, but there's a negative if the tax assessment then increases.
I don't
But-
believe the tax assessment changes based on a potential future use. It's based on what is on the site now.
I think that's true.
Positive that's the case.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
In
that's
terms
my
of all of my previous training in planning and zoning and rewriting zoning ordinances has me hesitating a lot in pushing forward any rezoning without an applicant asking for it. Because it is one of those things where it is perceived as you're messing with my property, and why are you doing that? And maybe this is just a mind shift for me, being in the Twin Cities, as opposed to, rural Wisconsin. But it could potentially cause some concerns with those people that are going to be potentially impacted. Again, it might be beneficial to them in the long run. It may create an opportunity, like you said, to consolidate land and then make it more valuable. It does create opportunities. Do we want to force our hand at making those opportunities available? That's a question for you. But again, if we have a developer that wants to come in and work with us and is interested, or a property owner, we're going to guide them towards rezoning if that is their question, because that's what we said we're going to do. If there's any potential change in land use, it's really not something that occurs too much in residential property, but if you had some kind of commercial business, for example, and you were going to change the zoning from one commercial district to another, that opens the envelope for a lot of different kinds of land uses that might come in and occupy that site that could be in complete different character than what's there today. So until it's kind of time to push that forward, I always approach it with a little bit of hesitancy, or caution rather. But this is our plan. This was approved and adopted. And this is, we are one of the states that requires consistency between zoning and land use. So it would be completely within our, rationality to go ahead and move forward with it.
And we're not changing anything. That's, I think, the important part.
Well, you're changing the zoning.
Yeah.
Well, we're not. We're just complying with the comp plan, right?
Well, but if we were to change the zoning ordinance or the zoning map, that does change the property potential for those sites.
Right, but that's already been planned years ago.
It was planned, but it's not been implemented.
Right, well, it should have been, right?
So I think there's the rationale of they should match. And there's also, if for instance, let's say somebody looked at the comp plan and said, hey, these are potentially redevelopment opportunities in this area, we could redevelop it into something that's a multifamily or something like that.
Sure.
If somebody's a developer, a property owner, is looking at the comp plan, they would see that. They could, in fact, request a rezoning to accommodate a plan. All we're doing is we're making the rezoning step.
Yep, we're eliminating that.
We're eliminating that step for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the only impact, I think. And it would seem to me, I believe you're correct about the property tax question. I don't believe that would impact their property taxes to rezone. And I don't see that there would be any negative impact on the property value.
I wouldn't
From a
think so.
dollar value perspective, it opens new opportunities for new kinds of development.
Sure, yeah,
So
if
they
anything.
could consolidate lots, build a bigger building, make it a multifamily, higher density, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So there's value there that we're potentially adding to the property owners. I don't know that there's any other,
I would say the negative is the neighbors.
neighbors
Although-
adjacent.
The fear of the
It's
unknown.
adjacent. Although the property that we're changing has a potential to go up, the properties that are adjacent, the potential, a lot of people don't want to live next to mixed. So
Right.
the neighbors are the ones where I see the biggest possible negative impact.
But again, back to Patrick's point, I mean, I'm just kind of going back and forth here because I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. By doing the rezoning to implement the plan, you are opening up you're signaling to developers that, yes, this is our plan and this is what we want to pursue it. And we're being active or proactive about it.
By us going through that process to rezone it, as you just stated, does that expedite those developers paying attention to where opportunity exists? And I guess from a city perspective, are we looking to expedite that process of redeveloping that area? Because if we're looking to expedite it and rezoning it is gonna move that needle quicker, because it's now gonna fall on any of those developers who are paying attention, fall on their radar, they're now gonna be taking more active role to pursue those properties potentially.
My gut says it's not it's a slow-moving train. We might have increased the speed limit just a little bit. But I can't imagine that there's anybody waiting in the wings for the rezoning to happen, and then they're gonna pounce on it. I just, it's not that kind of redevelopment opportunity, I don't think.
And it's not signaled, these are not, aside from the 17th Avenue, they're not signaled for redevelopment per the future land use map, or most of them
The
aren't.
one on 17th has been, there have been proposals put forth in the past on that one, that, as of right now, nothing has ever really occurred, but I know it has been looked at.
It continues to be looked at.
Right.
This is just going to R2, right? It's not like we're jumping to
Yeah.
some high-density thing. It's, I mean, people couldn't even put anything large, even if they combined lots, really. I mean,
Just is allowing your density to go up a little bit more.
yeah, so I don't think it's a, I mean, I don't remember offhand exactly what's allowed in R2, but I don't think it's even, you could do a duplex, maybe, something like that.
I have a question about when the comp plan was revised to show these as potential rezoning areas, potential changes.
I don't know that it was revised, other than the amendment that we did last year for the Lilly Building. This is the comp plan.
But this map that you had up, I don't know if it's the
Well,
one
this-
that's
that
up.
was the zoning map.
The zoning map that was showing these areas, this is described as the land use, the map 4-5 redevelopment staging, that map. That's showing those areas where the zoning may change to the medium-density residential.
Are you talking about the future land use map on the right?
The one on the right, yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I'm,
So,
what is
if you scroll to where you're adjacent 7th, toward the east end on 7th, and it's those areas south of 7th where we were talking about potentially changing zoning. When this map was created, was there a public hearing related to it?
You're talking in the future land use map?
Yeah, when it was originally adopted as part of the plan? There would have been a public,
One of you works for Met Council,
wouldn't there have
right?
been a public hearing?
There should have been a public
There
hearing.
should have been a
I
public
know in
hearing.
Wisconsin, anytime there's a new comprehensive plan, there is always a public hearing.
That's what I thought.
So I would think that that's how it is here too, but I haven't been through the process yet.
Well,
But we did have we did have a public hearing for the amendment.
I think it's important to know that when that was created as a long-term plan, that the public was invited to contribute. I think that's an important thing.
I feel fairly confident that that is part
Yeah.
of the approval process.
Because then you talk about the neighbors adjacent to the potential change. If they might have a problem with it, well, they may have or may not have had an opportunity to look at it when it was originally created as a plan. And I think it's just important to acknowledge that the public did have a say if they wanted one.
There should have been multiple times for the
And in
public to have.
fact, they would have a say in this case too, if we were to change the zoning. They would have another opportunity.
Correct.
And I think there's enough positive reasons to proceed as Commissioner Weiss had suggested and put forth the effort to make these zoning changes and hopefully seek the neighbors and the property owners' input. I think there's value in that, to make the effort to get the plan and the zoning map and everything compatible one with the other, and give the property owners another opportunity to speak on the topic.
As part of a public hearing or, okay, yep, that would be
And that would be required for a rezoning anyways.
correct.
I just want to be sure that I'm reading things right. We're really talking about rezoning the dark blue areas, right?
No,
No, we're talking about all of the orange, well, a lot of
Oh,
the
as
orange.
Well, okay,
A lot of the orange blocks,
okay.
or half blocks, as the case may be.
If we were to overlay this one with
Um,
I think before we do go down this road, we should have a clear understanding of what is allowed in R2 that isn't allowed in R1.
Oh, I can tell you that right now.
Townhouses is one.
Townhouses, yep. So what is allowed in both, single-family and two-family? Townhouses are allowed in R2. Multifamily is not allowed in either, that's R3. Cottage development is allowed. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I think it might be,
I think there's definition on that. I can't remember exactly the definition.
and that,
About it in terms of the,
So it's a small step up in density.
yep, and the minimum,
Yeah, I mean, if you
That's
look
it,
at the
allowed in
development
both.
that they did over on Sixth,
so that's allowed in R.
well, that was a PUD.
that was a PUD, but it would be a comparable type of unit, multifamily attached
Right.
house scenario.
I think that density in there is probably greater
That
than,
one is pretty high density.
yep.
Are any of these owners chomping at the bit to have the city do this? Or is this, you made a good comment earlier about this could be perceived as the city coming down a little heavy-handed. And what are you doing to my property? Why are you trying to change the classification of my property? I wonder about that.
You know, we could just have a mailing that goes out to those property owners as an introduction to the concept. We're considering this process as opposed to we've already made the decision and we're holding a public hearing. I mean, that's an idea we could pursue.
Yeah, I like that concept, that it's a soft approach, not a hard approach kind of a thing, where we're informing them that the goal would be to revise the zoning map to be compatible and compliant with the comprehensive plan. And that's why we're looking at it, is to bring consistency for the future development. And you know, maybe there's an explanation that it doesn't change anything as far as their own property and its use in the current way that it's being used. Doesn't force anything, it's just bringing compliance with the comprehensive plan. And I think there's probably a good way to do that is short of actually pushing forward and doing the public hearing and getting it all drafted up, but just get some, and invite feedback.
Yeah, I think it's just a simple letter,
Yeah,
just indicating exactly what you said and maybe having a picture of their property and the map, what it looks like now and what it might look like after this is done.
Randy, could you, the property on 6th Avenue East, 2620, 2606, and 2602, those would be going to R3, right? In the difference
Where are
between the
you?
two maps. Is it okay if I go show her where I'm looking?
Sure. Which map am I looking at?
Either one.
Where's Sixth Avenue?
Are you talking about?
See how,
just
what I'm
west of
struggling with here?
Charles?
You have to look up there.
Between Charles and Margaret?
So these three right here are the dark orange, and they're currently clear in the other map.
They're clear.
or they're in R1?
Oh, let's look at these colors here before I move it. Okay, yellow is the high density. We need to go over further.
Yep, no, up. To the right. These three aren't changing to the bright yellow, they're changing to the darker yellow, correct?
Well, that's the question. I mean, do we want to identify everything?
I was just looking at differences between the two maps, and we were all talking about going to R2, but I believe those are the properties I can see that would be going to R3.
Yeah, you're right. Mhm.
That's the parking lot, right?
No, they're houses.
Well, but this red triangle?
I believe that's the land that Luther owns, that's high with the steps that come down off it. Am I right in that? That elevated land?
I think it's the parking lot, I'm pretty sure.
Oh, I know what you're talking about. That one's closer to,
That one's the other side of Charles.
Yeah.
That's the other side of
okay.
Charles.
Yeah.
so there's other inconsistencies too. If you look at the red, here, there's this yellow in the middle here.
So I have a question, Brandy. Would it be possible to have almost an overlay graphic that would show us, here's what it is now, like be able to turn on the layer that says, here's what would change? Is there a way that could be created?
Probably,
Too much difficulty?
yes. I could find a way to show you better than this.
Or maybe,
Specific
or
properties.
maybe even, I'm trying to think if there's some,
We even have to go old school
yeah,
and, you know, send a mailing out to those of us on the commission that shows the base map and then photocopy onto a clear plastic what the overlay would be over it. You know, even that could work, make it easier to tell.
Clear plastic, where am I gonna find that?
he said old school. That was appropriate.
Yes.
It's like they used to use on the overhead
Acetate with a marker.
Like Mylar or something like that? Okay.
Well, that's where GIS came from, was layering all that
Yeah.
stuff.
Absolutely it
So,
was.
you know, it's just pre-tech GIS.
The trouble is that we don't have our own GIS in-house, and so I'm doing it the old school way
Right.
too.
Yeah.
But I can find a way to better illustrate specifically which areas are going from which color to which color, or which
Yeah.
district.
Be really nice if you just click it on, click it off.
It would be, but, yeah.
Well,
That would be nice.
I mean, maybe that already exists. Let's see. That first,
It probably exists somewhere,
It-
wherever this original graphic came from,
well, here, it does exist.
Okay.
It's right.
probably exists.
It's on my computer. I just need to get there. Datify. That has the future land use map and the zoning, and you can click them on, but it's not that
Tell you
great
what.
to,
Randy, give me a copy of your card. I'm having beers on Saturday with the guy that's kind of the head GIS guy for Blaine, and he really knows this stuff, so I can ask him if there's something that he could talk to you about.
so here's the zoning map. And the future land use map. Well, why didn't that one? Oh, there we go. So there's your click on and click off.
Uh-huh, yeah, that's the way to do it.
But for me, I really need to see it side by side, and I can prepare an exhibit for every single property if we want to go down the path of wherever there's a discrepancy and there's more than just the multifamily.
And then preparing something that can go to the property owners in, like you were suggesting, a letter or something that says the planning commission is considering this, reviewing it, your property would be impacted, but not in a significant way, but your property is listed, you know, on the comprehensive plan in this manner, kind of a thing.
I wouldn't say impacted.
No, but the point being that we're trying to inform them of what we're talking about and why we're even talking about it.
Sure. And one of the things that we can do to identify these properties is have the GIS person at WSB just run a spreadsheet for me based on the data attributes to, here's the ones that are actually different.
Is there a clear definition between the difference between medium density and multifamily that's being referenced in that, as far as what's included, what is not included, each one of those two groupings?
There is in the comprehensive plan.
It's,
That would be good to highlight.
it's
yeah.
basically just R2 and R3, right?
Well, did you say medium density versus low?
Yeah, medium density in multifamily residential.
I'm pulling open the plan. It'll take just a second.
Because a couple of the coloring differences that Jason was making mention of, understanding the use behind those, specifically the multifamily residential, which is the darker color.
So that's the difference. So kind of as we already talked about, what the zoning says that is permitted and not permitted, but the difference is primarily the density range is higher from 6 to 12 as opposed to 3 to 5.5.
I guess if I were a property owner, I'd be a little concerned about what is meant by small-scale attached residential structures. That's very nebulous to me.
That, and I would, going back to that letter idea, I would agree that, or I would use the word impact, and we quickly shied away from that, but it is an impact, though. I mean, this is, so some property owners, this is gonna look like an impact to their property. I think we should be clear-eyed about that and be honest and upfront that it could be, if we're going from R2 to an R, from R1 to an R2, you might have more density across the street or in your same block. Are you okay with this? We'd like your feedback before we do this.
It potentially affects their property,
But in,
or the property adjacent to them.
But
in reality, they may already be at these densities at the current built environment. So I don't know that it's truly going to be that impactful. But it is, a lot of it is perception.
I'm just saying, avoid the word impact because that has a very negative connotation to it.
Right.
There are other words that could be used
Yeah.
that are not quite so, because impact usually means, you know, that's going to affect my life, my budget, my
It can be
something.
perceived in a
Yes.
negative way.
Yeah. I'm not saying we need to sugarcoat it, but,
Right.
just, you know, let's not use anything that sends up red flags to people if we can avoid it.
as long as it's, I agree we shouldn't ring any alarm bells if we don't have to, but as long as it's honest and if it,
Oh, yeah.
if impact is not the right word, we find another word that's signals that we recognize that this is a change. And are you, just so the residents and property owners are aware that a change is potentially coming.
Yep. So do I think I have direction. Should I say it and confirm that I heard you correctly?
Why don't you do that and we can make any corrections that if we feel that we need to.
Okay. So I believe for next month's meeting, we're going to have a closer look at what properties are being rezoned from which district to what. And also you would like a letter, a sample letter that would go out in advance before any public hearing would be held.
That sounds consistent.
I like it.
Okay.
So, question, that L-shaped property that the city owns north of 17th that we first referred to, is the plan to approach the rezoning with that piece and this all together, or do you want to handle that as a separate piece?
I understood the task was any discrepancy in the two maps would come to you again next month with a little bit more clarity.
Yes.
I think that's something
was
we could
my-
handle next month. We could decide if we want to
Yeah.
split that off as a separate or do it as part of the mass, I would think.
I just thought, because the one is, the majority of it is going to be in that 7th corridor downtown, whereas the other one is is a very separate instance in itself. I just thought breaking the two of those apart might be
Yeah.
easier.
Well, then we might want a separate letter for that particular area if the situation is different enough from what's going on around 7th. But that's why I say let's take a look at everything next month, and then we can decide if we want to split that off as its own separate or not.
All of the letters would be unique to the individual property areas. So that would clarify for them.
Yeah, because I would say I would have a similar question about the properties the furthest east or furthest west on 17th Ave, adjacent the shoreline of Casey Lake Park. That on our comp plan map is showing that as a higher density, medium density residential.
This here?
Yeah,
Do you not see it in front of you?
no. Seeing me doesn't help very
I
much.
think that,
There it is.
that orange
There
block
it was.
is,
Yes.
isn't that the school?
No, I'm looking for the piece that's,
Yeah, that's the old school and.
yeah, those are residential properties. Right now,
Oh, or that school is here.
those are residential
School's
properties.
over by White Bear, yeah.
Right, but it's a change in zoning.
That is a change in zoning.
And I think that's another piece that, like the L-shaped one on 17th and Delaware, I think you might want to look at that one separately, eventually. I mean, when we ultimately decide what to do. Because it's such a unique, it looks like it's 3 properties, and they're a very unique, in fact, I think it's only 2 residences, I think.
There's 2 numbers in the middle.
Yeah, I think the middle one belongs to one or the other of those other properties. But I think being that it's lakeshore, it's in a lakeshore overlay, and
Yeah, I don't
The
know why that
thought
one
of
made it.
why would that one be changing density? I mean,
That's a good question.
it's probably a great redevelopment opportunity, honestly.
I don't know that you could put
You
much
could do
there
some
given the
really
shoreline.
good things on a piece of property like that if the owners wanted to, you know. I'm just putting it out there as it's a rather unique piece that may want to be treated in a unique way, ultimately.
Yeah, I would agree with that one.
And that further confirms, I think, for us to, as a group, to look at all of the impacted properties.
Right.
It's gonna help, in case there's another one that we're not
Yeah.
capturing as we're sitting here,
Right.
that's a good idea.
Yep, I
Okay.
can bring back a more detailed staff report looking at each of these specific areas.
And I just want to clarify the state statute that requires our zoning plan to be in alignment with our comp plan. Is there, do they say if you don't do this, there is such and such will happen? Or I mean, what's the,
I'll
Is
include
there
that
a-
in the analysis too,
Yeah.
because I don't have that memorized yet.
yeah, it's just an interesting thing, because I mean, if the state statute is telling us to do this, then, you know, our hands are tied to some extent, right? And,
I don't think, I'm just going off of, what I know from other places, but what they mean by zoning consistency is that you can't make future decisions that are not consistent with your comp plan. So if somebody comes in and
okay.
wants to rezone
okay,
to commercial, and that's saying it's not zoned for commercial now, and it's saying residential, then you would be making a decision that's inconsistent,
got
and
it.
that's where you'd get in trouble.
okay.
It's about consistency. It's the proactive component that we are proposing is a choice that we can make or not.
Okay.
Yeah, because the long-term comp plans are a guidance plan to let us know where we can do things or where we would like to do things in the future.
But that's a good question, so I'll take a look at the statutory language and put it in there so you know exactly what we're dealing with.
That does raise a good question, though. So if the comp plan kind of shows what the potential is as we look at what's within the city confines, right? This is what our potential is, here's where we think there might be opportunity for these specific zoning opportunities. Yes, it's the potential. There's nothing saying that it is going to happen or it isn't going to happen, but we're just indicating it's the potential. If there is something that does show up in the interim that might be slightly off of that, and you said that kind of falls out of that compliance. I'm sure that if that opportunity presented itself, there would be, discussion about following that potential if it deemed to be a viable direction to go.
Yeah, and that,
In case that, I would anticipate that comp plan would have to be updated.
yes.
How does,
That's how that works. That's exactly it. So you see something that maybe you hadn't conceived of before, and after some analysis, it makes good sense for the city. Then you consider, do we want to take this a next step and do a comprehensive plan amendment? In which case, it goes through the same process as the regular comp plan. It gets reviewed by Planning Commission. There's a public hearing, and I think, and council approves. So you're still being consistent then. So you had to make that change in order to maintain the consistency. And we had to do that last year with the Lily project in order to make sure that our density was going to be appropriate for our planning purposes and also for sewer and water purposes with the Met Council or whoever the sewer provider is.
The Met Council is the overall director of those, but it just depends as to, you're supposed to send it out to adjacent cities, and MnDOT gets a copy if there's a MnDOT highway passing through the area or immediately adjacent to it, and the watershed district would get something, and that type of thing, just to make sure that everything is more or less in balance.
Anything else? All right, I'm gonna sit down.
So I think we've discussed that one to the point where now you have a bunch of work to do, Brandy. So I appreciate that.
Gives you something to do at next month's meeting.
Next.
I know you're just sitting around bored, doing nothing at all these days, right?
If she doesn't have a specific task, she's cleaning up.
A lot of cleaning up to do.
Yeah, right.
Do you have the agenda open?
Yeah. We're up to old business, are we not?
Yep.
And I don't know that there is any.
I don't know that we ever have any old business. I don't know that we need that on
Yeah,
there
what-
anymore.
Rarely.
Qualify for old
Rarely. Well, if something gets put on hold and tabled from a
Oh,
previous
okay.
meeting, that would go on old
Signing,
business.
there's
I
always
would
like
think.
signing updates that we kept having to go back to. So maybe that could be our old business that's.
So
recurring.
Brandy, do you have any staff report?
Sure. Brian asked, city manager asked me the other day on the status of the Polar Plaza project, the Dunkin' Donuts, and so I inquired with that developer, and it sounds like with many other property owners and developers across the metro area, there's issues with construction prices and interest rates, so it's kind of slowing progress a bit. So I don't have a real update other than it's slow. It's slowed down quite a bit, so hopefully that still comes to fruition. The other update would be the other work plan items that we had identified were some ordinance amendments. Those would be the subdivision ordinance and the zoning ordinance. And specifically with the zoning ordinance was looking at the parking requirements. I started to update the subdivision ordinance and just barely got a start on it. It's a little bit more complicated than I had imagined it would be, just because that our community is different than a lot of other ones. We're locked in, and so our needs are a bit different than your greenfield type of city, so it's gonna take a little bit more strategy and analysis to put it together. So that'll be coming hopefully in a few months, but it is something that's being worked on. And the other thing that came to mind related to the parking and the zoning code, we have parking requirements for pretty much anything with no exceptions in the downtown. So we have a situation where we have this restaurant that is they have a building permit pulled to go into the old Subway, which was the old Brothers Bistro, which doesn't have enough parking. So we found a workaround for it, but the question came to my mind is, how necessary is our parking in the downtown for retail and restaurants and those kinds of things? So I started to do a little bit of research on that too, but I haven't been able to get that pulled together yet for Planning Commission review, but something to put on the horizon as we think about potential updates to the code.
Great.
And that is all I have.
Okay. Councilmember Norby.
Tuesday's meeting, I'm told, was a record-setting 19 minutes in length.
Wow.
I'm
Don't
gonna have to
usually
ask,
last that long?
I'm gonna have to ask Brandy for help on this. One of the things that got changed is the per diem. Would that include this group as well?
I believe it is across the board. I wasn't paying that close of attention. I think it may have been specific to employees, but I understand that the per diem rates for travel were like 20 years old, and so they were modified. So I would imagine that they were modified across the board, and not just for employees. But I would have to get some clarification on that, or I could have Jenny.
Yeah, I just didn't, I'm not quite aware of what councils are able to put in for a per diem if they're doing an offsite event. So the potential of change, if you could have gotten 22, now you can get $36 for a meal.
If we have such a need.
Yes.
Okay. All right, reports from commissioners. Let's start with, with Commissioner Brennan.
I pass, I can't think of anything.
Okay?
I do not have anything either.
I have something that might qualify as new business, but I'm not positive it really is our concern, but I'll bring it up anyway. And that is No Mow May coming up. Because I have heard from several people that know I'm on the planning commission that said they were told last year that the city staff was supporting it, but they were still getting issued fines from the city for not mowing and then getting them waived. So I was just thinking, that's kind of, we need to have a slightly clearer policy on that, because it doesn't look good for people to have to come down to City Hall and fight something, especially when city staff is saying, we support this, and then other departments are saying, we support it, but we're gonna fine you for doing it anyway. So,
In the 19 minutes on Tuesday, that actually was discussed.
okay, good.
It was advised from our lawyer that if the city does truly want to support that, it would take a resolution from the city council. And I believe there's a potential of them creating that resolution. I'm not 100%,
Sure.
but it was discussed
Okay,
at
good.
Tuesday's meeting.
That was the reason I was bringing it up, was I wanted to make sure that there was awareness and discussion. Thank you. That's the only thing I have. Yeah, ask away.
What is No Mow May, other than, obviously, nobody is mowing, but what's the story behind that?
I think it's supposed to be helping the butterflies and the insects in general to, not to destroy the habitat that they need to be able to breed and migrate and what have you. So,
I just Googled it, and that's basically what it's for. It's
yes.
to protect the habitat and the pollinators. and
Pollinator.
Pollinator, that's what I was trying to remember the word for.
Pollinator friendly,
Yes.
yes. We have, Commissioner Rothy, do you have any?
I have nothing to add.
Can I add on to that no mow May thing?
Yeah.
I keep seeing in social media and other places that you should be very careful of the early mowing because of bunnies that are in
Oh, yeah.
the grass. I
Oh,
don't want to run them over.
There are, it's surprising the things you can encounter in the spring if you get a good rain. We actually planted a unique seed type in our boulevard. So our front yard is actually mowed probably 2 or 3 times a year. It's a unique grass type. And it looks really great because it grows up, it gets, 8 inches tall and kind of lays over. And so it looks really good, and even in drought conditions, stays very, very healthy.
yeah, I'm
So-
going over to micro clover in my
I know. So
backyard.
there's some
once I
interesting
get
things.
everything terraformed
Yeah,
there.
there are things available that look just fine. We've never had a complaint. We actually thought, when we originally planted it, we thought we were going to do wildflowers and more prairie grass kind of thing. But that's a bit of a stretch, I think, right adjacent to the street. So we didn't go quite that far. So it's not quite as pollinator friendly, but, we have other areas of the yard. So it is an interesting concept. With that, we are at the end of our agenda. So I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion from Commissioner Rothi.
I'll second.
Competition for a second. We'll give it to Commissioner Brennan. All in favor? Aye.
I.
We are adjourned.
Almost exactly 1 hour.
Almost exactly 1 hour.